Today, I want to discuss a few things related to Gautam Buddha. You see, there are very few people in the world who are regarded as being icons beyond any particular religion, and Gautam Buddha most of all. He is a universal symbol of the spiritual state. His very presence is the symbol of the spiritual state. It does not belong to any particular religion as such, does not belong to any particular country as such, does not belong to any culture as such. And Gautam Buddha perhaps is the most important figure when it comes to consciousness in entire human history. I'm talking about the individual called Sakyamuni. Of course, in the deeper you go into Buddhas, you'd find that it's defined as a cyclical rotation of Buddhas throughout the universe. Gautam Buddha is not the first. There have been billions of Buddhas, there have been millions of teachings. Yet, in our hearts and minds, he is equated with that state, the state of Pragya, and that's the first teaching. Spiritual insight, having a spiritual attitude towards all things, the material and the mystical. Doesn't matter if you're a monk or warrior. Both ends of the spectrum, Gautam Buddha's teachings apply because they teach us to be spiritually aware within the flux, within the chaos of all things. In the tough times we face today, in the crisis moments we face today, in the pandemic, he becomes especially important. This state of pragya, spiritual insight, having the ability to face things, all things calmly, coolly, collectedly, with a serene state of consciousness. That is his abiding lesson. And that's why he remains the most timeless figure when it comes to the spiritual quest. And we have to remember that he transcends all particular definitions. As much as he's known in the Far East, Japan, etc., then in Tibet, in India, in Ceylon, in Vietnam, in Cambodia, we sometimes forget that when Alexander came to India, he had also carried back the essence of Buddha's teachings. His entourage had carried it. And therefore, Buddha's teachings reached the West, they reached Greece, they became imbibed in Hellenistic culture. Therefore, he bridged East and West effortlessly even way back then. And most of us don't realize this. So, the first thing we spoke about is pragya. The second thing is bodhi. Bodhi means spiritual awareness. And the word Buddha itself comes from bodhi. Having spiritual awareness in the midst of all things is really the path to fearless living. It imbues one with an otherworldly quality. Then no matter what one does, one is relaxed, one is non-tense, one is in one's highest state of awareness, one's highest state of relatability. One is not perturbed by what happens in the world. And the third thing, which is at the very root, the very heart of Gautam Buddha's teachings, is the word called Arya. You see, in Sanskrit, it's called Arya. In Gautam Buddha's language of Pali, it's called Arya. Just a small difference. And it's an overlap in India between the Sanskrit, the more Hindu explanations about Gautam Buddha, as well as the Buddhist explanations. These are not very important. So there's divisions, the Mahayana, the Mantrayana, the Hinayana, the Theravada, the Vajrayana, which eventually became Tibetan Buddhism. All these are different classifications. They don't really matter. At the heart of it is this idea of Arya, which is nobility in living, having self-respect, having respect for the world, having a broad spectrum of consciousness, looking at the world with an eye that is all-encompassing. And that is the beauty about Gautam Buddha. In India, you look at the Purans, okay, the Garud Puran, the Agni Puran, the Bhagavad Puran. Gautam Buddha is of course regarded as the ninth avatar, the incarnation of Vishnu. Eventually, these religious divides are not important at all. They all assimilate, especially in Indian culture, because Indian culture has always been very assimilative. And remembering these three root teachings of Gautam Buddha, which we talked about, Pragya, spiritual insight. Bodhi, consciousness, the power of consciousness. And the third is nobility in thought and action, which is Arya. We begin understanding the very crux, the very essence of Gautam Buddha. And of course, there are depths and depths, unfathomable depths, which we'll go on discussing.